面对这样的一个情况，美国的总统拜登怎么办？他的做法就是分裂以色列的内阁，而以色列现在呢，可能下届想竞选总理的人正成为美国拉拢的对象。我们刚刚在前面《文茜世界周报》最后一段告诉大家，拜登故意泄露了一段他和科罗拉多州的参议员之间的谈话，说 BB 就是纳坦雅胡的简称。我们已经很靠近了摊牌时刻，而目前以色列内阁有可能因此被分裂，最后成为美国解决他在以哈战争中美国一直支持以色列，然后失去全球对他道德敬意的最后一个方案。
或许这是以色列停止接近种族灭绝巴勒斯坦人的唯一机会。美国白宫正由贺锦丽发动以色列内阁分裂，阻止纳坦雅胡对加萨地区的赶尽杀绝。
There must be an immediate ceasefire.
Tonight, the Biden administration's sharpest criticism yet of Israel's handling of its war with Hamas.
What we are seeing every day in Gaza is devastating. People in Gaza are starving. The conditions are inhumane.
Vice President Kamala Harris today in Selma, Alabama, laying the blame for Palestinians' desperation in part on Israel.
As I have said many times, too many innocent Palestinians have been killed.
就在贺锦丽向以色列说出重话的隔天，他在白宫接待了以色列战时内阁里被认为最有实力接替纳坦雅胡成为总理的人。
Gantz is a former defense minister and political rival of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He sat down with Vice President Kamala Harris, who called for more aid to be allowed into Gaza. She also called for a ceasefire.
甘茨此行不只见到了贺锦丽，还见到了美国国务卿布林肯以及美国国家安全顾问苏利文和美国中东特使。以色列时报说，甘茨这次美国行部分目的是为了缓和以色列与美国之间的紧张关系。因为华府对纳坦雅胡处理加萨战争的方式越来越失去耐心。
The war has slowly become a political vulnerability for President Biden as he runs for re-election and faces growing pressure from within his own party and even campaign.
When Hamas launched its gruesome terror attack on Israel on October 7th of last year, President Biden made a decision based on conviction and calculation. He announced his complete solidarity with the country. Biden must have calculated that the only way to have any influence on Israel would be to hug it close, show real empathy, send it the arms it needed, and thus earn Israel's trust to shape its response. It was a thought-through strategy, but it has failed almost completely. About 30,000 people have now died in Gaza, a large portion of them children. About 1 in 4 people are on the brink of famine, and almost all are dependent on food aid. As of late December, the water supply is 7% of what it was before the war. Most of its hospitals no longer function.
A drip at a hospital in Gaza. The slow trickle of help. Children are dying of starvation. The before and after of Gaza's children. These are the ones that made it to Rafah after fleeing the north, where the WHO said a famine is looming. More children lost to war. This baby girl had a twin sister. She also died. Thousands of children in Gaza have been killed in the fighting. Doctors say this girl died from malnutrition.
The U.S. has repeatedly pressured Israel to make greater efforts to protect innocent civilians, but to little avail. Now it has been counseling against an invasion of Rafah, the city nestled close to Egypt, where over 1 million Palestinians have huddled together. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has promised to invade Rafah, whether another hostage deal is made or not. Washington has warned that after the war, there should be no Israeli seizure of land in Gaza and no new Israeli occupation of the territory. The Israeli government's plans are to do both. The result is that American policy on the Gaza war now appears hapless, ineffective, and immoral. The image of U.S. officials wringing their hands about civilian casualties while providing ever more weapons is grotesque. the image of a president of the United States mumbling words like indiscriminate and over the top to describe Israel's bombings suggests weakness and passivity.
虽然美国没有明说，不过以色列时报指出，一位不愿意透露姓名的美国官员表示，美国政府不在乎人们认为与甘茨的会见传达了对纳坦雅胡在以哈战争中的做法感到不满。
His warm reception in Washington is in stark contrast to the fact that Netanyahu has not received an invitation to the White House since his return to power some 14 months ago.
The reason that Benny Gantz, is the centrist opponent, went to Washington is that Washington's looking for someone to deal with. They're making it very clear here they don't want to deal anymore with Netanyahu.
Gantz also made the rounds with congressional leaders looking for lawmakers to pass an aid package to Israel. Perhaps this is the U.S. looking at the centrist leader as a potential future alternative to the current Netanyahu government.
The reactions from within Netanyahu's government have been very, very critical of Benny Gantz's visit. One senior Likud member has used the term Trojan horse to describe Benny Gantz's trip to the U.S. Finance Minister Smotrich said the U.S. is trying to divide the Israeli government and its society.
以色列时报披露，纳坦雅胡指责甘茨未经他批准擅自访美，甚至下令驻美使馆在甘茨访美期间不要提供任何协助。接下来的英国也一样，以色列驻伦敦大使也接获指示，在甘茨访英期间不要提供任何协助。纽约时报报道，当甘茨3月6号在伦敦见到英国外交大臣卡麦隆，也见到了英相苏纳克，他得到一个尖锐的信息：以色列必须采取更多措施，允许人道主义援助进入加萨。
Israel is the occupying power. It is responsible.
纽约时报指出，这次的会晤也向纳坦雅胡传达了一个讯息：纳坦雅胡的拒绝停火已经让伦敦和华府的官员感到沮丧，在以色列国内也是一样。以色列电视台最近的一项民调显示，如果今天举行选举，甘茨领导政党将在议会中赢得39个席位，而纳坦雅胡则只能拿下17席。
Back in Gaza, the situation is desperate. A scrap of cardboard is used to get every last bit of flour. Tonight's announcement from Biden about a military port is perhaps a sign of the Americans losing patience with the Israelis. But that help from the sea is still weeks away, and the people of northern Gaza are starving right now.
即使如此，联合国官员表示，以色列内阁依旧不太愿意开放更多过境点，向加萨提供援助。美国和约旦只能继续空投物资。3月7号，比利时也首度加入了空投救援行列，抢救57万即将饿死的加萨人。
But as they spoke, talks with Hamas in Egypt came to an end with no ceasefire deal that would have freed some of the hostages in exchange for a pause in fighting and the release of Palestinian prisoners.
还记得刚刚那个掉点滴的小男孩吗？
Starvation and occupation, experienced by children like Yazan. In search of help, he and his mother traveled from the top of Gaza all the way down to the south, a journey that ended yesterday. His doctor said he died of malnutrition. He was 12 years old.